Hi, welcome to another episode of Look Ma No Hands. My name is Linda, and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about all my creative outlets, oftentimes crochet and everything yarn related, art, painting, drawing, different coloring books that I like to mess around in. I talk about books that I'm reading and different things that I'm watching on TV, streaming, when I go to the movies, and every once in a while I throw in a little segment that I call Fancy Footwork, where I show how I do different life skills using my feet since I was born without arms. This week I am not wearing anything crocheted because the main project that I worked on this week was not a garment project. So I'm just wearing a blouse that I have just kind of in my wardrobe, one of my favorite type of, a little bit more dressed up type of outfits. So yeah, the project that I'm working on is kind of springboarding off of last week's willow square poncho. As I mentioned, I was working on the squares, trying to find 4 of them that matched up enough to make the poncho. And in doing so, I ended up making like 7 or 8 squares before I found 4 that I felt coordinated well enough to make the poncho. That being said, needing only 4, I had a bunch left over and plenty of yarn left, so I didn't want to just have the time that I worked on the squares be wasted, so I took what was remaining of that yarn and made a few more squares. I was able to kind of eke out almost enough squares to make a blanket that I felt was of adequate size. So I had to borrow a little bit of yarn here and there to just kind of be a little bit of a filler to make up where I was a little shy on the squares. But ultimately came out with 16 squares that I stitched together to make the blanket, and it worked out to be about 36 inches square. So it looks decent. As I finished putting the squares together and decided to put a border on, I started with just single crochet border. Felt like that wasn't quite finished looking, so then I did a round of double crochet, and after I did that, I get kind of irritated with how the seams that join all the squares together, where you do the border around it, the border ends up looking a little bit wavy. And there was nothing wrong with it other than it had a little bit of wave to it that my eye is immediately drawn to that and then kind of interprets it as a flaw. So to eliminate that little bit of irritation that happens for me, I did kind of like a shell stitch border around the edge all the way around to make it look a little bit more appealing to myself. Other people probably wouldn't notice it, wouldn't think anything of it, but for me, I just was not real thrilled with how it turned out, so had to put that little bit of a fancier border on the edge to distract my eye from what I consider to be a flaw. I'll pop in a picture so you can see what I'm talking about. It really isn't horrible, but I had to add that little bit of a fancier border to make it satisfactory to myself. So yeah, that's what I worked on pretty much all week. Kind of working through the pattern, like I said, as it was laid out by Bella Coco, who is a designer and YouTube content creator that I really enjoy. So I just continued on making the squares as she explained them, and then the rest of it was kind of like my own design when it comes to the assembly and the border and stuff like that. So I guess a little bit of designing that I've done this week, so that's exciting. It turned out pretty good. So yeah, this week what I've been reading, a little bit of a heavier read this week than typical. I'm definitely going to put in a little bit of a trigger warning here in terms of the main theme or main topic of this book is sexual assault and rape. So if that's something that might be triggering, definitely don't read this book. That's pretty much the entire plot line of this book, is trying to bring to justice the men who violated this one individual. The name of the book is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. It is a fictionalized story of a person who lived in the 1700s, kind of like 1760s to like the 1790s-ish. The woman's name is Martha Ballard, and she is a midwife for the town. In addition to doing midwife services, she's also kind of like their medic or medicine woman, however you want to refer to this person from, the 1700s. She's not a doctor because she's a woman, and women in that time couldn't be doctors, but she does pretty much all of the same things that a doctor of that time would do. So throughout this story, we find that Martha herself, as the author, has decided to kind of take the story, she takes liberties, and she talks about this in her author's notes. She takes liberties with the story in that she uses the journal that Martha kept as the premise and the basis of her work of fiction, but then she takes liberties with some of the things just to kind of flesh out her novel. So in this, she made the assumption that Martha at some point in her life had been sexually assaulted because of how thoroughly compassionate and caring she was towards a woman who she documented as being a person who was sexually assaulted. The men who violated this woman are men that are considered like pillars of the community. One of the men is a judge in the community, which obviously then is going to make it very difficult for justice to be brought for this woman. The way the author crafted the character of the judge really shines a light on the monster who is someone who does something like that, and how men in power know how to abuse their power. The man that does this, the main character of the story that does this, is all I can say, he's a monster. He's a horrible man that abuses his position. Not only does he violate one of the young characters in the story, but he's also working very hard to basically steal the property from Martha and her husband that they live on, that they've lived on for a number of years. And in that time, the contract that they had, kind of like the lease that they had on the property, was such that after a certain amount of time and meeting certain criteria, the property would default to them and they would no longer be renters or have a lease on the property. They would own it. And so they're coming to the end of their agreement with the committee that will allow them to own this property. So in addition to Martha being aware of what this man has done, she's also battling him to try and save her family's livelihood and home. There's so much depth to this story, so many like intertwined characters in the story. Martha has a very large family, and some of her adult children are tangled in some of the plot with the bad men in the story. Another important plot point in this story is there's a murder in town that they're trying to solve. At the beginning of the story, a man is found dead in the frozen river. They have to basically like break the ice to extract the man from the river. They find that he has injuries that are kind of in line with having been beaten up in a fight, whatever, and also markings that make it appear that he had been hanged, hung, whatever. He is also one of the accused in the sexual assault that is coming to trial. So there's a lot of questions as to how he winds up dead. And a lot of questions in terms of who might have done him in, because there's connections between him and some of Martha's adult sons, and so there's a lot of problems for Martha and her family when this man comes up dead. Martha's husband, some of the just like interactions between Martha and her husband, the way the author kind of writes the characters. Martha's husband is very loving, very protective. His name is Ephraim, and just the kind of character that you think of in term for like point of reference, kind of reminds me of Pa from Little House on the Prairie. A very like rustic frontiersman. He's a carpenter, a woodworker, and just that real no-nonsense kind of man that, you know, he has his morals, talks about what's right and wrong, is raising his sons to be, you know, strong, independent, upstanding men. There's a lot of discussion in the book about like family relationships and expectations of like courtship and marriage and premarital sex and all of that kind of stuff that I thought was very interesting, because we always think of like the founding fathers and just that time period as being very puritanic and just like, I don't know, it just, in my mind, everything was just very prim and proper. But the way this story is written is the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like, human nature is what human nature is, and teenagers go off and do what teenagers do, and young people don't want to have to wait until marriage and all of that kind of stuff. So even though the social mores of the time were very strict, everything was pretty much like it is now, where, you know, young ladies and young gentlemen do what young people do, and they end up having children out of wedlock, and just all of the very kind of judgmental things that happen in a community when people experience that, especially when you think of like small town living and how you can't really keep a secret in a small town. So that was something that was interesting, the way the author presented that in the story. And yeah, just the family dynamics of the older brothers looking out for their younger sisters, and thinking of like courtship rituals that would have happened in the 1700s, where they would have kind of like barn dances or whatever you want to, like, I don't know what you would have called it, but they just had like these gatherings, parties for the young people, so that they could have time to have their courtships and experience, you know, what we think of as like school dances and stuff. So that was an interesting part of the story. And then just even everyday life, that things that we kind of take for granted now, like indoor plumbing, where, goodness, the inconvenience of having to go out to the privy, like, the story was very well written in small details like that. So other than the heaviness of the main theme of the book, I felt that the book was very well written. It progressed pretty well. There were no parts of the story where I felt like things got kind of stagnant. The story really moved forward, and there were a lot of small details of everyday life that made the story more interesting. Ephraim has a pet falcon, and I'm a big fan of birds. Like, when I had a pet, one of my pets was a parrot that I owned for almost 20 years. So I was interested in the idea of having like a bird of prey as your pet, so to speak. And that animal came in to be a big part of the story. Living in the wilderness for them. There was a fox that was a big part of the story, and just kind of the way people think of like animals, symbols in life and things like that. The author was very upfront about the placement of the animal, and even kind of being very explicit in the fact that the fox played a huge role, like had like a very symbolic purpose in the story. So overall, very well written. It was a story that was a little bit on the longer end of what I've been listening to lately. It was a little over 12 hours of listening. So that's pretty much all I read this week, because it was, like I said, a longer story. And on top of that, I had a bunch of other things going on that took me away from my desk, so I had to kind of find time when I could find time, and therefore I only had one book this week. Yeah. In terms of what I've been watching, not much on General Hospital, because with the baseball wild card series happening, General Hospital was preempted, but that's okay, because my Cubbies, go Cubs go, were in the wild card series, and very exciting. They're moving on to the next round, so I'm a happy girl. I do enjoy my sports, so yeah, I'm excited to see how things play out for the Cubs. So hopefully we'll be in it for the long haul, but you know how it goes. We always say, well, maybe next year. But so far, we're doing it this year, so I'm excited. I've been watching Dancing with the Stars, and again, thoroughly enjoying it. Not too thrilled with who got cut this week. Had my opinions as to who it should have been, but at least my favorite people are still in the running, so there's that. And then still continuing on with The Golden Bachelor, which I don't know, some of the women this year, or this season, are a little bit more dramatic this season, so we'll see. Previous seasons of Golden Bachelor and Bachelorette have been a little bit more lighthearted, and this season seems to be rolling out to be a little bit more like the regular seasons, which I much preferred the more subdued attitude in the house, where everybody's kind of playing the game for themselves and being a little bit more cordial to one another. I don't know. I guess I'm just a little too Pollyanna. I shouldn't be watching the show. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's just my take on it. So I don't know. We'll see how things play out, but I'm hoping that things calm down a little bit, because I don't like all of the drama and the animosity between the contestants. I would like to see more of each individual contestant doing what they can do to showcase themselves, not necessarily trying to cut somebody else down. So that's just my take on it. And yeah, if you have an opinion on it, I'd love to hear. Even if your opinion is different from mine, that's okay. We're all entitled to have our own feelings on things. So there's that. We've been continuing to watch Who's the Boss, getting closer and closer to the end of the series. So I'm excited to kind of hear what Tim's take is of how they wrap up the series of Who's the Boss. We also took some time to start watching the Three Stooges from like the very beginning. I grew up in a house where like my dad is hugely passionate about slapstick comedy and the Three Stooges and all of that kind of programming. So I just remember like Saturday nights hanging out with my dad and my brothers watching the Three Stooges. And I have three brothers, so my dad used to refer to them as the Three Stooges, and they really liked the slapstick comedy humor of Three Stooges, and so much so that they used to like eye poke one another and do all of those stoogey things. And my parents were pretty laid back about it. They were just like, as long as you guys aren't hurting each other. But you know, the Stooges, they were pretty intense. My brothers could get pretty intense, but watching it now as an adult, it still cracks me up. I still love all of the goofiness that was the Stooges, all the play on words, and just, yeah, it's still one of my favorite programs to watch. So Tim and I were having a good time watching that together. And then we also watched another few episodes of The Good Omens, and my opinion is kind of sort of changing on that one. The first couple of episodes were pretty great, and now not so much. So I can kind of almost understand why it got canceled, because it really is kind of dragging along. Like it lost its momentum. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the mood the next couple of nights that I had watched, you know, the next like 2 or 3 episodes of it. But unless it really tanks, I'm going to continue to watch through to the end, because maybe it just has like an ebb and flow. I'm not sure. But I'm committed now, so I'm going to keep going with it. Yeah. And then I'm getting close to the end of the second season of The Summer I Turned Pretty. And the other night watching, I'm on the second to the last episode of season 2, and wow, that's all I can say. I definitely enjoy, again, the kind of ebb and flow of Belly's conflict that she has with which of the 2 boys she wants to be with. So yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm intrigued to see which brother she ends up with. I know season 3 is already dropped and done, so it's not really a surprise. I'm trying really hard to stay away from the spoilers, because I like being able to watch it and not already know where it's headed. So if you know, please don't tell me, because I'm enjoying being able to find out on my own. But I guess if you spoil it for me, it's my own fault for talking about it, but please don't spoil it. Yeah. So that's all I've been watching. Like I said, this week it's been kind of a crazy week. There have been a lot of different things going on that I'm not really going to talk into details about, but I've been quite busy in my off-screen life, so yeah. And this weekend, as things are kind of kicking off the autumn season, there's a fun little fall festival in the neighborhood that we're going to be going to, and we have a picnic to go to with our theater group that we kind of hang around with and participate with. So that'll be fun and exciting, seeing our theater friends and just having some good fellowship and good food. I'm sure it's a potluck, everybody's bringing a little bit of this and that, so it'll be an exciting weekend. I'll have maybe not a lot to talk about in terms of what I've been reading and watching next week even, or what I've been stitching on next week, but I'll definitely have some fun stories to share with you guys of life events and activities. But yeah, this week I'm a little short on content, but wanted to come on and share all of the fun and exciting things I've been dealing with and working on. If this is your first time here, this is pretty much the format and the length. Last week I got super long-winded and talked so much that the episode was a little over an hour long, and sometimes that happens. I just get chatty. This week I don't have quite as much to talk about, but if you're a returning viewer, I'm glad that you came back after last week's long-winded episode. If you enjoy my content, go ahead and subscribe, click the like button, drop a comment, all of those fun things that kind of kick me into the algorithm so that more people can find me on this little corner of the YouTube universe. But yeah, like I said last week, I have fun making these little videos every week, so I'm going to keep doing it. And I guess even if I'm just talking out to the ether, I like the sound of my own voice, so I'll just keep doing it. Until next week, I hope you have a great week. Let me know what you're up to. Are there any fun fall festivals in your area? Any other seasonal things that you've got going on? Your plans for the upcoming holiday season? What do you celebrate? Do you celebrate Halloween? Do you celebrate what kind of Thanksgiving traditions do you have? What other winter holidays do you celebrate? And I say winter holidays because I know there's so many of them. For myself, we do Christmas, but I know Hanukkah comes up around that time. There's Kwanzaa celebrations. So if there's anything that I didn't mention, or if you celebrate any of those kind of celebrations, what do you do? Let's be a place of cultural diversity and just kind of sharing all of those fun things, because I always like to learn about, different viewpoints, different worldviews, and things like that. So please share with me, let me know what you're up to, and until next week, I will see you soon.